You can listen to The Front on your smart speaker every morning. To hear the latest episode, just say, "Play the news from The Australian."
From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Tuesday, August 20. It's showtime for Kamala Harris as the Democratic National Convention kicks off in Chicago with all the razzle-dazzle and star power you'd expect. First up, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton take the stage. We've got live updates from our correspondents at the convention right now at theaustralian.com.au. The coalition will target Chinese voters in inner-city seats to appeal to the giant diaspora, with messages of economic management and being tough on crime. It's a bid to win back voters who embraced John Howard but were less enthusiastic about Scott Morrison and Peter Dutton. That's an exclusive, live now at theaustralian.com.au. Australia is accepting Gazans fleeing the Israel-Hamas conflict in numbers that vastly outweigh the United States, United Kingdom, France and New Zealand. Today on The Front, how the issue descended into political argy-bargy and why Labor and the Coalition are at odds. In the seaside town of Zawaida in Gaza, locals dig through the rubble of a home and warehouse building destroyed in an Israeli airstrike. In central Gaza, a young father grieves after reportedly being told of the death of his wife and their newborn twins. And aid workers in Khan Yunis remove bodies from another flattened building. The human suffering in Gaza, pounded by Israel, totally controlled by the totalitarian regime of Hamas, is unending. For most Gazans, there is no way out. To the south, Egypt has built a giant wall to keep Palestinians out and closed its crossing at Rafah. Israel keeps a close guard on the only other overland route out, into Israel, at the Erez crossing in Gaza's north. There's no escape by sea either, thanks to Israel's naval blockade along the coast. In the early months of the Israel-Hamas war, Gazans were able to leave, and thousands did, fleeing through that Rafah crossing with all their possessions. But where could they go? At least 3,000, it has emerged, came to Australia, where they had family members or other connections. About half of those have arrived since October 7 last year, when Hamas conducted a terrorist attack on southern Israel, murdering more than 1,200 people and taking hundreds hostage. Another 7,000 Gazans have sought to come here but have been rejected. And today, The Australian is revealing figures that put Australia's intake into some perspective.
That is quite a lot when we look at other parts of the world.
Ben Packham is The Australian's Defence and Foreign Affairs correspondent. There's an important distinction here about the way Australia is handling this. We are issuing visitor visas, not protection or refugee visas. That means they're not being granted official refugee status. And it also means they aren't being subjected to all the tests that determine whether an asylum seeker is a genuine refugee.
If you look at the US, for example, the US has accepted 17 Palestinian refugees since October 7. So just 17, and it has no special entry arrangements for Palestinians other than extending the visas of Palestinians who were already in the United States.
By comparison, the UK has issued just 168 protection visas. In New Zealand, it's 254 out of about 3,000 applications. And in France, 260 Gazans have been granted protection visas. Only Belgium comes close to Australia's numbers, with about 2,500 protection visas granted since January and 3,200 last year. All of those nations submit applicants to quite strict biometric criteria. That's things like photographs and fingerprints.
So, look, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but Certainly the evidence from other developed countries is that they are imposing some quite strict requirements on entrance from Gaza.
There's a lot of noise in immigration policy in Australia, and it's a politically dangerous topic for Labor, which has been smashed by the Coalition for being soft on borders for many years. But sometimes what gets lost is that Australia has, by global standards, a hugely generous record.
Australia is a very sympathetic country when it comes to taking people out of war zones.
Dennis Shanahan is The Australian's national editor.
Don't forget that previous Australian governments have taken 12,000 people from Syria. We took people from Afghanistan, a lot of people from Afghanistan, and of course during the Taliban retaking there, we took thousands again. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and this point is made by a lot of people, why are we taking so many people when so few nations around the world are doing the same? And why are not Arab countries taking them? These are fair and reasonable questions.
This intake had been quietly ticking along until Peter Dutton was asked about it on Sky News last week.
I don't think people should be coming in from that war zone at all at the moment. It's not prudent to do so, and I think it puts our national security at risk.
OK, that's Peter Dutton, the opposition leader.
It kicked off a giant political stink, where Dutton was accused of racism, and Anthony Albanese got himself tangled up, talking about whether or not the arrivals had been vetted by ASIO, the National Security Agency.
It is clear that ASIO boss Mike Burgess had said on the ABC a week ago that when there was a criteria hit from someone seeking a visa to come into Australia from Gaza, that is coming up on basically a wanted list, one that is put out an alert, a terrorist alert list. Then ASIO looked at that bloke. If he said he was Joe Bloggs and his name was on the terror list, ASIO looked. Now, what the Prime Minister was attempting to do was to say that in all cases, ASIO is involved in the process, is what he said. He was giving the impression that ASIO was checking every person. That wasn't true. Mike Burgess made it clear that that was not true. And then the worst thing that the Prime Minister did was under pressure, he misquoted, completely took out that key issue of when there is a criteria hit. And he said in the Parliament, this is a direct quote from ASIO's Mike Burgess. That was wrong. He did mislead the Parliament, and that still needs to be corrected.
One of the challenges in Gaza is establishing anyone's bona fides. Hamas rules the Strip with an iron fist and hasn't allowed Gazans a free and fair vote since it was elected in 2006. It runs everything, from the health authority to the media. That means most of Gaza's population is connected to Hamas in some way, by employment or by sympathy. So, how can Australia establish who's a Hamas sympathiser and who's not?
When those 12,000 people were brought out from Syria under the Abbott government and from Afghanistan under the Morrison government, they were first taken to a third country, Jordan, Lebanon, and the Emirates. And there they were processed and given full security checks using biometric data, US intelligence bases, and information from our Five Eyes partners. This meant that people were not coming direct to Australia and then being able to A, be here and apply for permanent status. And two, it gave us time to be able to look through, because when a regime fails, people try to get out. That is, people who've been working with the regime try to get out. And they try to get out, and some successfully, amongst the refugees. This is a tried and true method of escaping for people who have been guilty of crimes and may commit others. So what you have to do is make sure that if someone says, I'm Joe Bloggs, he is in fact Joe Bloggs, and he has Joe Bloggs' clean history. That's what the point about going to third countries and to using biometric data and up-to-date data from our Five Eyes intelligence partners.
ASIO boss Mike Burgess has said biometric data is of limited value if individuals aren't on any databases. What do you compare them with? Here's Ben Packham.
Now, the government is currently looking at what it can do because these visitor visas we're talking about, they're 3, 6 or 12-month visas. At some point, they're going to expire. And so the government is looking for a more permanent solution at the moment. We assume that some will be considered for humanitarian visas. Some may be considered for extended family type arrangements, but it is not clear how many are in those categories. And obviously the government is now quite sensitive to these types of inquiries because they are coming under a lot of political heat over this issue. So they do want to come up with a solution, but given the amount of politicking around this, it is not imminent, I don't think.
So, who's being genuine and who's being opportunistic as the politics play out? That's after this break. So, what are the politics here? Labor is under attack from those who believe it's failed to criticise Israel for its war on Gaza, and those who say it's failed to support Israel strongly enough. Domestically, there are concerns about a rise in anti-Semitism and the danger of Islamophobia. Mike Burgess, the ASIO boss, has lifted the terror threat level from possible to probable without citing any threat in particular. Here's Dennis Shanahan.
When Peter Dutton said there should be a pause on people coming in from Gaza, he was attacked as a racist and told, that he was against Muslims. The Muslim leadership criticised him. He was accused of racism, still is being accused of racism. And yet the overall political influence is that a large sector of the public will support that view. It is a reasonable question. On the micro politics, there is no doubt that we have seen the rise of the Muslim vote movement in Australia since October 7. We have seen a candidate declared in the seat of the Minister for Immigration, the new Minister for Immigration, Tony Burke. We are seeing real pressure from Muslim voters on Labor in Western Sydney, where there are at least 5 seats that could be in danger. And so there is always seen through the prism of potential electoral damage to Labor within those seats. But overall, and I don't think the Liberals have got much chance of winning any of those seats, but the point is overall, it is more likely that the Labor Party will maintain those seats with reduced majorities, but that the more general question on security and immigration will allow Peter Dutton to gain back teal seats once strong Liberal Conservative seats. And that's where we will see the change, the overall change on the ground at election time. I think that the Prime Minister is trying to look after his own areas, specific geographic areas, and also trying to portray Peter Dutton as a racist. Now, that's what's happening. I think the politics will move in total towards Peter Dutton.
Dennis Shanahan is the Australian's national editor, and Ben Packham is our Foreign Affairs and Defence correspondent. You can read all their reporting and analysis right now at theaustralian.com.au.